Joining us now is the man who predicted that the U.S. would, in fact, invade Iran. With us is John Kiriakou, American former CIA officer, whistleblower, and well-known writer as well. Thank you so much for joining us on Times Now, Mr. Kiriakou. Now, we're in the middle of an extreme escalation in West Asia, something that it seems you predicted in advance. We know that U.S. and Israel's aggression has come at a time when they were in the middle of talks with Iran, at least U.S. was, and you've said that he'll give you 10 days, he'll give you 2 weeks, and then he'll just attack 2 days into it. You stand validated, although it has come at a great cost for many in the Middle East.
I'm actually very sorry that I was right. But I said in the beginning that one of the things that I learned very early on in my CIA career was that if you really want to understand American military intentions, watch American naval movements. One of my instructors at the CIA said when I was just a very young man, he said, "We won't send multiple aircraft carrier battle groups to an area unless we intended to use them." I wasn't alarmed when the president sent the USS Abraham Lincoln to the region. I grew very alarmed when he also decided to send the USS Gerald R. Ford to the region. That's when I was convinced we were going to attack Iran.
Right. Now, is this war going to be a long-drawn one, a big one in that sense? Because do you feel that Trump is in it for the long haul? He suggested that it may be 4 to 5 weeks, but is that more of positioning, or is that a very real possibility?
I think that he believes that it will only be 4 or 5 weeks because, and this is a problem not just for Donald Trump, but for any American president. There's never a plan for how to get out. It's not hard to overthrow a government. It's extremely difficult to leave with a stable government in place. It was easy to invade Iraq and overthrow Saddam Hussein. But then what do? You can't just leave the place in chaos. And I fear that there is no U.S. policy and that Iran will be left in chaos.
Right. But Trump doesn't appear to be a very patient man, though, because do you think that he's thought out about the subsequent leadership who would lead Iran? You know, because the bigger question is that if U.S. wants to look at a regime change and long-term engagement, you know, what really are we looking at? It would not just mean a prolonged inflation and multiple technicalities and risks of leaving the country and the people, just like happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the basis of the problem here is that Donald Trump listened to everything that Benjamin Netanyahu told him, and that Netanyahu convinced Trump that this would be easy, that as soon as we overthrow the government or as soon as we kill the top leaders, the Iranian people will be dancing in the street, and that they will want to open relations, both diplomatic and economic relations with the United States and possibly with Israel, and then everybody's going to live happily ever after. And that is just not real life. It's not the reality on the ground. I think that what we're beginning to see now is the reality on the ground, where certainly you can kill the Ayatollah Khamenei, you can wipe out the military and nuclear scientific leadership, and it doesn't make anything better. The Iranians are not going to see us as liberators. They're going to see us as invaders and occupiers, and they're going to fight for their lives.
Right. And the claim that 48 Iranian leaders, commanders, etc., have been taken out in strikes, do you think that this is something that is quite plausible, given the nature, the number of attacks, and the kind of intelligence that possibly the CIA could have provided?
Yeah, I think it's plausible. I think that it probably rests on the definition of a leader. I think probably any nuclear scientist or anybody at the brigadier general level or higher, Donald Trump is probably calling a leader. But this is another thing that American leaders don't understand, is that you can kill a general and he'll just be replaced by somebody else. There's a never-ending supply of generals. So we killed 48 generals. Let's say we killed 480 generals. There's still going to be others waiting in the wings, and they're still going to try to defend their country.
Right, because as a former intelligence officer, one of the big questions is that intelligence no doubt would have played a very key role in trying to, take out or carry out these strikes, because it's not just, of course, Ayatollah Khamenei, but also various facilities related to defense that would, I assume, be taken out, including some reports of nuclear facilities as well. What do you think they would have done to have made this happen? it's clearly something that would have taken several months and years perhaps of planning, because this is a repeated pattern. We've seen how Yahya al-Sinwar, the rest of the Hamas leadership, for instance, have been taken out using precision drone strikes, and that's happened with Hezbollah as well. What can you tell us about what could have possibly happened in preparation?
I have to say that I was surprised yesterday when the New York Times reported that the locational information relative to the Iranian leadership was actually collected by the CIA and passed to the Israelis. I would have thought that the opposite occurred, that the Israelis had collected the information and passed it to the CIA. The Israelis have had Iran infiltrated from the top to the bottom for decades. The Israelis have been very good at recruiting, for example, Afghan refugees. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can hire an Afghan refugee to stand on the corner and note down in a notebook when the general who lives in that apartment or the scientist who lives in that apartment leaves the house or comes back to the house. You get phone numbers, you pass the phone numbers back to the Israelis, and they can use that as targeting information. The CIA has notoriously bad sources inside Iran. The Israelis work there much more freely than the CIA does. So it was a surprise to me that the CIA had collected the information and had passed it to the Israelis. That tells me that there is much more blanket electronic collection coverage, particularly by NSA, than we had previously thought.
Right. Do you believe that Iran has the nuclear abilities that could make America nervous? Because it's ultimately about Iran's nuclear program that we're seeing a lot of talk in run-up to all of this happening. What about, say, for instance, a dirty bomb that they could potentially use during the conflict?
Yeah, I think a dirty bomb is far more likely than an actual nuclear weapon. I don't believe the Iranians have a nuclear weapon. I don't believe they ever had one. I don't believe they were trying to build one. Twice the CIA has published national intelligence estimates saying that there is no nuclear weapons program, that the Iranians are not enriching uranium to make it weapons grade, and that the fatwa that had been issued years ago by Ayatollah Khamenei was being respected, and that there was no program. Well, there is fissile material. It has been enriched partly, not to weapons grade, but it certainly could be used as part of a dirty bomb. And frankly, if I were the Iranians and my country were being attacked and potentially occupied by foreign powers, I would give some thought to creating such a bomb.
Right. You know, for Donald Trump, a Maduro-like situation is perfect, but this time he's picked a country that's 3 times the size of Venezuela in terms of military might, resources, and possible allies who are ready to assist, including Russia and China, so on and so forth. What do you think is going on in Trump's mind at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that anybody at the White House thought this through. You're exactly right. This is not in any way Venezuela. We're talking about an enormous country with a 5,000-year history, 92 million people, and with the ability to accept delivery of radar systems or surface-to-air missile systems from the likes of Russia and China. So I don't think that the White House or the Pentagon has really thought this through. I really don't believe that there is an end game. We don't know what victory looks like, for example, and we certainly don't know what's coming next after we murder all of these Iranian leaders.
Right. Now, you've spent a lot of time in West Asia, and Manama were also, hit in the Iranian strikes. Now, what do you see in terms of a geopolitical shift with all Arab countries now, in fact, coming out and they're anti-Iran? In fact, Iran has even attacked its Arab neighbors, even though it's U.S. bases. The fact is that they stand united. And there's also, of course, a lot of civilian damage that has happened. How do you see all of this panning out?
This sets Arab-Iranian relations back decades, and I'll explain why. The most difficult relations that Iran has had with the Gulf Arab countries have been with Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. The Kuwaitis mind their own business. They don't bother anybody. You don't have to worry about the Kuwaitis. The Omanis are a beautiful, peace-loving people. You don't have to worry about the Omanis. The Emiratis have billions of dollars worth of Iranian businesses based mostly in Dubai, and they've always cultivated proper, appropriate relations with the Iranians. The Qataris usually try to stay out of it, but they also host the world's largest Air Force base at Al Udeid. The Bahrainis and the Saudis hate Iran, and Iran hates them. But with that said, over the last couple of years, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Sultan has worked very hard to improve relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the Bahrainis have tagged along to that. This decision to allow the Americans to attack, a decision to allow the Israelis to cross Saudi airspace to attack, sets those relations back decades. And then just this weekend, the Washington Post reported that it wasn't just Netanyahu who had urged President Trump to attack. It was also Mohammed bin Salman. And it appears that he made a calculation that eventually relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran would be better without the mullahs in power than they are with the mullahs in power. This was a very big risk.
That's a big insight that you're telling us. Is there anything to back up that claim?
No, it's one of those things where we're just going to have to take the Washington Post's word for it.
All right. But let me ask you in very plain terms, will we see Israeli or US boots on ground? Because if there is, a conflict for such a long period of time, for instance, in Iran or in Lebanon, as we've heard, Israeli officials mention to counter what the Hezbollah is attempting to do.
I cannot imagine a scenario where there are American boots on the ground. We learned very painful and difficult lessons in Afghanistan and Iraq, where we were mired in war for 20 years, the longest wars in American history. Again, this is a country of 92 million people. It's a factor of 2.5 or 3 times the size of Iraq. Geographically, it's not just enormous, but it's very forbidding with difficult high mountains and huge population centers. There's no way that the United States could win a war on the ground against a country like Iraq. The plan was apparently to try to cut the head off the government and allow people to take up arms, citizens to take up arms and take control of their own government. That's not actually working out in these early days, but that was the plan. Otherwise, I don't think there is a plan. I think that, let me actually make one more dichotomy too. It's to the US's benefit for some pro-democracy forces to seize power. It is in Israel's benefit to see years of chaos, akin to what we've seen in Libya. So the end game is different for both countries.
Right. And here's a question that may appear to be a little out of the blue, but I'm sure you'd understand why I'm asking this and why it would be of interest to people here in India. Recently, Pakistan signed a defense pact with Saudi Arabia, which said in as many words that an attack on one would be treated as an attack on both. Now, do you see this escalation to the point that Pakistan gets involved, given that Saudi Arabia has been hit?
I don't believe so. That's a tough question, but I don't believe so. I really believe that pact was meant to protect Pakistan from India. India, of course, is an existential threat to Pakistan. We hear that word bandied about so often, but I think it's not really applicable to the current situation. And frankly, Pakistan has its hands full with this new conflict with Afghanistan, another war where I think neither side is really 100% sure of who the enemy is.
What role do you envision for India in this conflict? Because India has always appealed for de-escalation, whichever the conflict be, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's Israel, Gaza, or even in the current conflict.
Well, to tell you the truth, armed conflict, a hot war, is not in anybody's best interest right now, except perhaps Israel. Israel loves chaos because it feels safer in times of regional chaos. I think that the best thing the Indians could do would be to fortify their border and stay out of it and let these belligerents kill each other.
Lastly, I saw one of your podcasts where you've mentioned that this is an attempt to distract from the Epstein file revelations. Isn't that trivializing the matter?
I don't think so. I don't think many foreign observers understand just how horrible these Epstein revelations have been, where it turns out we're a country here in the United States run by pedophiles, where pedophiles have protection from the law. And the pedophiles can do whatever they want. They can commit whatever crimes they want against children and not have any legal repercussions. The core of the Republican Party right now is furious about these Epstein revelations. And the Attorney General Pam Bondi said last week that the last 3 million pages that were released were so explosive that she won't release the final 3 million pages. Why not? Did they implicate sitting leaders, people who are actually in office right now? It's nice to have a neat little war to distract people from domestic problems.
All right, John Kiriakou, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.